One afternoon, as I waited at the bus stop again, I noticed a young woman standing nearby. She looked tense, restless. I recognized that posture. The posture of someone bracing. She glanced at me briefly, then looked away. I did not say anything. Some recognitions are silent. I understood then that life often places us at the same stops. Different times, different reasons. Each of us waiting for something we may not yet understand. I did not feel the need to pass my story on. Not every lesson needs to be spoken. Some are lived quietly, and lived lessons have their own strength. I realized that my past no longer needed guarding. It was not fragile. It was integrated. I stopped asking myself if I was healed. Healing felt like the wrong word. I was not repaired. I was integrated. Everything I had lived belonged to me. Nothing needed to be cut away. As the days passed, I felt more present in my own life. Not watching it from a distance. Participating. Choosing. Resting. The woman at the bus stop knew my name. And my past. But the most important thing she revealed was not something new. It was something I had always known, but never trusted. That I was allowed to exist as I was. Without apology. Without explanation. And with that knowing, I continued on. Not looking back with fear. Not looking forward with anxiety. Just walking. Steadily. Into the life that was already mine. As I kept walking into this life that finally felt like my own, I noticed how naturally I began to let go of urgency. For a long time, everything felt like it needed to be solved quickly. Feelings. Memories. Conversations. Now, I allowed things to take their time. Time was no longer my enemy. It was my ally. I noticed how my body responded to this change. My jaw no longer stayed tight. My hands rested easily at my sides. I had not realized how much tension I carried until it was gone. One evening, my sister asked me if I still thought about leaving again. I smiled softly. No, I said. I don't feel the need to run anymore. She nodded. That's how I know you're safe, she said. Safe. That word once felt fragile to me. Now, it felt earned. I stopped apologizing for needing space. I stopped apologizing for needing rest. Those needs were not weaknesses. They were signals. Salma and I met once more at the bus stop, by chance. She recognized me first. We stood facing each other for a moment, smiling. You look peaceful, she said. I feel peaceful, I replied. She nodded. That's all I hoped for, she said. We did not sit. We did not revisit anything. We simply exchanged a quiet understanding. Then she walked away. That felt right. I realized then that not every connection is meant to last. Some exist only to guide you to yourself. Once that work is done, they step aside. I stopped measuring my life against other people's timelines. Against what should have happened. My life had its own rhythm. And I was finally listening to it. I noticed how differently I responded to uncertainty now. Where once it made me anxious, it now made me curious. Uncertainty meant possibility, not threat. One morning, as I waited for the bus, I caught my reflection in the glass of the shelter. I looked calm, present. I smiled at myself. That smile felt genuine. I thought about how far I had come from the person who once believed she had ruined everything. I had not ruined anything. I had revealed something. And revealing the truth always feels disruptive at first. But disruption is sometimes the beginning of clarity. I no longer felt the need to rewrite my story. It did not need editing. It needed acceptance. I noticed how often people search for dramatic closure. A final conversation. A clear apology. A perfect ending. Life rarely offers those. What it offers instead is understanding. And understanding is quieter, but stronger. As I moved through my days, I felt less defined by what happened to me and more by how I lived afterward. That felt empowering. I stopped seeing myself as someone marked by the past. I saw myself as someone shaped by it. There is a difference. The woman at the bus stop knew my name and my past. But what stayed with me was not her knowledge. It was the way I chose to respond to it. With openness instead of fear. With truth instead of retreat. And that choice continues to echo through my life. In how I stand. In how I speak. In how I wait. I no longer wait with tension. I wait with trust. Trust in myself. Trust in the life that continues to unfold. Quietly. Honestly. One step at a time. As that trust settled more deeply, I noticed how rarely I felt the need to look over my shoulder anymore. 4 years, I moved through life expecting something to catch up with me. A question. A judgment. A memory I wasn't ready to face. Now, nothing chased me. My past walked at my pace. I began to understand how much energy fear had taken from me. Fear had shaped my choices, my silences, my distance. Without it, I felt room inside myself. Room to think clearly. Room to feel honestly. Room to rest. One afternoon, my sister and I sat together, watching the sun move across the room. She spoke quietly. "Do you ever think about how close you came to losing yourself?" "Yes," I said. "And how close I came to believing that losing myself was safer." She nodded. "Staying hidden keeps you alive," she said. "But it doesn't let you live." That truth felt settled now. I stopped trying to be invisible. Not in a dramatic way. Just in small moments. I let myself be heard in conversations. I let myself take time when I needed it. I let myself be present without apology. I noticed how the world responded when I stopped shrinking. Not everyone changed, but I did. And that was enough. I became more comfortable with not being understood by everyone. Understanding is a gift, not an obligation. I chose where to offer my story. I chose where to keep it private. That choice felt empowering. Salma and I no longer spoke often, but I carried her presence with gratitude. She was a reminder that truth does not always arrive from where you expect. Sometimes it arrives quietly, from someone who watched and waited. I began to notice how different my inner dialogue sounded. It was no longer questioning my worth. No longer replaying old accusations. It was calm. Supportive. It sounded like trust. I realized how deeply I had internalized other people's fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of shame. Fear of disruption. Letting that go was like setting down a heavy bag I had carried for years without questioning. One morning, as I waited for the bus, I noticed how still I felt. Not numb. Still. There was a difference. Stillness felt like peace. I thought again about the moment when my name was spoken at the bus stop. How it once felt like exposure. Now, it felt like recognition. Being recognized does not take something from you. It gives something back. I understood something important then. My story was never dangerous. Silence made it seem that way. I stopped thinking of myself as someone who had to recover from the past. I was not broken. I was shaped. And shape can be honored. As the days continued, I felt no urgency to reach an ending. This story did not need one. It was alive. Still unfolding. I moved through my life with a quieter confidence now. Not announcing myself. Not hiding. Just being. The woman at the bus stop knew my name. And my past. But the most lasting change came from what I did afterward. I chose to stand still instead of running. I chose to listen instead of denying. I chose to trust myself. And that trust continues to carry me forward. Not dramatically, not loudly, but steadily. Into a life where my name belongs to me. My past belongs to me. And my future unfolds without fear of being seen. I walk into it calmly, with my head up, and my heart open. As I walked into that future without fear, I realized something quietly important. I no longer felt the need to be careful with myself in the way I once was. Careful not to feel too much. Careful not to say too much. Careful not to exist too fully. That kind of careful living had kept me safe once. But now, it felt limiting. I chose a different kind of care. The kind that is gentle, not restrictive. The kind that allows space instead of shrinking it. I noticed how my breathing changed throughout the day. It stayed deep, unforced. For years, my breath had been shallow, as if my body expected something to go wrong. Now, my body trusted the moment it was in. That trust felt earned. One afternoon, my sister said something that made me pause. "You don't seem haunted anymore," she said. I thought about it. "I think I stopped haunting myself," I replied. She smiled softly. That felt true. So much of my pain came from replaying old accusations in my own voice. I had learned to silence that voice with compassion, not force. I became more patient with other people's silences too. When someone avoided a subject. When someone changed the topic. I did not take it personally. I understood now how heavy unspoken things can be. I stopped expecting clarity from the people who once confused me. Clarity came from within. I had lived the truth. I no longer needed it confirmed. Salma's role in my life had become something gentle and complete. I did not think of her often anymore. But when I did, it was with gratitude. Some people enter your story briefly and leave forever changed. They are not meant to stay. They are meant to point. I realized how much of my life had been spent proving I was not what others said I was. That effort had been exhausting. Now, I did not prove. I lived. One morning, standing at the bus stop again, I noticed how ordinary everything looked. The bench. The road. The sky. Nothing marked the place as important. And yet, it had changed me. Not because of where it was, but because of what happened inside me there. I understood then that transformation rarely announces itself. It slips in quietly. It settles. And one day, you notice you are no longer the person who needed to run. I no longer felt the urge to explain my calm to anyone. Calm does not need defense. It exists. I thought about how often people search for permission to move on. They wait for apologies, for explanations, for closure. Sometimes, none of that comes, and waiting becomes another kind of prison. I had stopped waiting. I learned something deeply personal through all of this. You can carry truth without carrying bitterness. You can remember without reopening wounds. You can be seen without being exposed. My name no longer felt heavy when spoken. It felt like a simple fact. A sound that belonged to me. I no longer rehearsed what I would say if someone asked about my past. If the question came, I would answer honestly. If it didn't, I would live just as honestly. That felt like freedom. As I look at my life now, I see continuity instead of damage. I see a line that bends, but does not break. I see resilience that did not harden into cruelty. I see a woman who learned how to stay. The woman at the bus stop knew my name and my past. But what matters most is what I know now. I know that my story was never something to escape. It was something to understand. And once I understood it, I did not need to hide. I did not need to defend. I did not need to disappear. I simply continued, living openly, breathing fully, standing where I am. and letting the world see me as I am. Not a secret. Not a mistake. Just a woman who learned, slowly and honestly, how to belong to her own life. As I continued belonging to my own life, I began to notice something subtle but powerful. I stopped thinking of myself as someone who needed to be understood in order to be at peace. Understanding was no longer a requirement. I understood myself. And that understanding stayed steady, even when others remained confused. There were moments when people asked gentle questions. Where are you from? Why did you move here? Why don't you talk about your family much? I answered simply. I no longer filled the space with explanations. I let my answers be enough. I realized how much of my old life had been shaped by anticipation. Anticipating reactions. Anticipating rejection. Anticipating blame. Now, I lived in response. If something happened, I met it. If it didn't, I didn't invent it. That shift gave my mind rest. One evening, my sister and I sat on her balcony as the sun went down. She said quietly, I don't feel like I'm holding my breath anymore. I nodded. Neither am I said. We sat there watching the light fade. No pressure to speak. No pressure to explain. Just presence. I noticed how much easier it became to forgive small things. Not because I was trying to be kind, but because I was no longer carrying so much weight. When you are lighter, you don't cling to what hurts. Salma crossed my mind occasionally. Not with urgency. With appreciation. She was part of my story, but not its center. Her role was to remind me that truth exists even when it is hidden. Once I accepted that, I no longer needed her to carry it with me. I stopped asking myself who I would have been if things had gone differently. That question no longer served me. I was who I was. And that was enough. One morning, as I prepared to leave my apartment, I noticed how calmly I moved. No rushing. No scanning. Just movement. That told me something had healed deeper than thought. I understood something important then. Healing does not mean you stop remembering. It means remembering no longer controls you. I no longer feared places that once held meaning. The bus stop. The old streets. They were no longer charged. They were neutral. And neutrality felt peaceful. I noticed how differently I related to my own reflection. I did not search for faults. I did not look away. I recognized myself. That recognition felt grounding. I began to see my life not as a response to the past, but as an expression of the present. Each day was not about repairing what was broken. It was about living what remained. The woman at the bus stop knew my name and my past. But what stayed with me was not the shock. It was the stillness that followed. The stillness that allowed truth to settle. I no longer needed that moment to define me. It had done its work. Now, my days defined me. I continued living in a way that felt honest. Not perfect. Not resolved. Honest. And honesty gave my life a quiet dignity. I walked forward without urgency. Without fear of recognition. Without the need to explain. Carrying my past gently. Living my present fully. And trusting that whatever came next, I would meet it as I was. Whole. Present. Unhidden. And that, for me, was enough. As that sense of wholeness stayed with me, I noticed how naturally my life began to feel ordinary again. Not ordinary in a dull way. Ordinary in a peaceful way. For a long time, my inner world felt dramatic even when my outer life looked calm. Now, both matched. That balance felt new. I stopped waiting for moments that would define me. I realized those moments had already passed. What remained was how I chose to live afterward. That choice was quiet, but steady. I noticed how rarely I spoke about the past now. Not because I was avoiding it, but because it no longer demanded to be spoken. It had found its place. One afternoon, my sister said something that made me smile. "You seem comfortable with yourself," she said. That wasn't always true. "No," I replied. "But it is now." Comfort felt like a small word for something so meaningful. I thought about how often people mistake peace for resignation. They assume calm means giving up. I knew better. Calm meant I had stopped fighting what no longer needed fighting. I stopped measuring conversations by how much I revealed. I measured them by how safe I felt being myself. Some conversations were light. Some were deeper. Both were allowed. Salma's presence in my life had become something symbolic. She was not a constant reminder. She was a turning point. A reminder that silence can be broken, even years later. I noticed how differently I responded when people disagreed with me. Before, disagreement felt like threat. Now, it felt like difference. Difference did not diminish me. It expanded my understanding. One morning, while waiting for the bus, I watched a mother gently adjust her child's jacket. The moment was simple, but it stayed with me. I felt no sadness, only tenderness. Tenderness for moments that exist quietly, without witnesses. I understood something deeply then. Life does not need to compensate you for what you lost. It simply asks you to live honestly with what remains. I no longer rehearsed my reactions to the future. The future did not feel like something I needed to prepare for defensively. I trusted my ability to respond. I thought again about how often people stay silent to keep peace. Peace built on silence is fragile. Peace built on truth is steady. I had learned the difference the hard way. As my days continued, I felt less like someone recovering and more like someone living. That distinction mattered. I no longer felt the urge to correct the past. The past did not need correction. It needed acknowledgement. Once acknowledged, it softened. I realized how often fear had disguised itself as responsibility. I told myself I stayed quiet to protect others. In truth, I was protecting myself from isolation. Understanding that helped me forgive myself. I stood at the bus stop one final time in my thoughts. Not as a place of fear, but as a place of recognition. A place where my name was spoken without accusation. A place where my past was acknowledged without judgment. The woman at the bus stop knew my name and my past. But what truly mattered was what I learned afterward. That my life did not need to be defended. It needed to be lived. I continue now with a steady heart. I speak when it matters. I stay quiet when it doesn't. I trust myself. My story does not end here. It does not need to. It continues in ordinary days, gentle conversations, and quiet moments of recognition. I walk forward without fear of being known. Because I know myself. And that knowledge has given me peace. As that peace stayed with me, I began to notice how gently my sense of purpose changed. I no longer felt the need to explain why I lived the way I did. I no longer searched for reasons to justify my choices. My life did not need to be impressive. It needed to be true. That realization settled into me like a deep breath. I noticed how my days began to organize themselves naturally. I woke up without dread. I moved through my routines without resistance. Even difficult moments felt manageable. Not because they disappeared, but because I trusted myself to meet them. I stopped thinking of my past as something that happened behind me. It felt more like a quiet companion now. Present, but not demanding. I carried it without effort. My sister once said, "You don't seem afraid of your own thoughts anymore." I smiled. "I don't fight them," I replied. "I listen, then I decide." That felt like wisdom earned slowly. I realized how often fear had once disguised itself as caution. I told myself I was being careful. In truth, I was protecting old wounds from being touched. Now, I trusted that touching them would not destroy me. I became more selective with my energy. Not everyone needed my attention. Not every situation required my response. That selectivity felt like self-respect. Salma crossed my mind less often now. Not because she mattered less, but because the role she played had completed itself. She was a messenger, not a destination. I stopped seeking moments of recognition. I no longer needed someone else to see me to feel real. I was present to myself. That presence anchored me. One quiet afternoon, I sat alone and reflected on how my life felt now. Not exciting. Not dramatic. Balanced. Balance had once seemed boring to me. Now, it felt precious. I thought about how many people confuse peace with emptiness. Peace is full. It is full of acceptance, clarity, and trust. I felt all three. I noticed how differently I responded when plans changed unexpectedly. Before, I would tense. Now, I adjusted. Flexibility felt natural. I no longer rehearsed old arguments in my head. Those conversations no longer needed my attention. I let them rest where they belonged. In the past, I began to feel gratitude in small, quiet ways. Not gratitude that demanded expression, but gratitude that settled in the body. A relaxed jaw, an easy breath. I stopped trying to define myself by labels. Victim. Survivor. I was simply a person who lived through something and kept going. That was enough. The bus stop existed somewhere in the city, unchanged. But it no longer existed the same way inside me. It was no longer a beginning or an ending. It was a moment. A moment that reminded me I could choose to listen. I understood something gently but firmly. Life does not require us to resolve everything. It asks us to stay present. I stayed. I walked forward without carrying questions that had already been answered. Without carrying guilt that was never mine. Without carrying fear that no longer served me. The woman at the bus stop knew my name. And my past. But the most important knowledge came after. I knew myself. And with that knowing, I continued living. Quietly. Honestly. With a heart that no longer hid. And that, finally, felt like home. As that sense of home settled inside me, I noticed how little I needed from the world to feel complete. I did not need reassurance. I did not need agreement. I needed alignment. Alignment between what I felt and how I lived. That alignment brought a calm that stayed. I stopped trying to make my life understandable to everyone. Some people would never know the full story. And that was all right. Understanding is not owed to everyone. Peace is owed to yourself. I realized how much quieter my inner world had become. Not empty. Just orderly. Thoughts no longer collided. Memories no longer competed. Everything had its place. One afternoon, my sister said something that felt like a quiet closing of a circle. "You look like you trust yourself now," she said. I nodded. "I do," I replied. "And it took me a long time to get here." She smiled. "I'm glad you did," she said. So was I. I stopped waiting for the moment when I would finally feel finished. Finished healing. Finished forgiving. I understood that life does not work that way. It keeps unfolding. And that was not something to fear. I became more attentive to the present. To the weight of my steps on the ground. To the sound of my own breath. Presence felt grounding. It reminded me that I was here. I thought about how many times I once wished someone would step in and save me. Say the right thing. Do the right thing. Now, I realized that someone had. It was me. I no longer measured my worth by how quietly I could endure. I measured it by how honestly I could live. That shift changed everything. Salma's presence remained in my life as a reminder. Not of pain, of courage. Courage to witness. Courage to speak. Even if it came late. I noticed how differently I treated uncertainty now. Uncertainty did not scare me. It invited curiosity. It meant something was still alive. One morning, standing at the bus stop again, I felt no connection to fear. Just familiarity. I stood there calmly, waiting. Not for answers. For the bus. That simplicity felt meaningful. I understood something clearly then. Healing does not erase the past. It integrates it. It allows you to carry what happened without letting it shape every step. I no longer saw my life as something interrupted. It was continuous. Even the breaks had meaning. The woman at the bus stop knew my name. And my past. But what stayed with me was not her voice. It was my response. I chose to listen. I chose to believe myself. I chose to keep going. And so I continue. Not searching. Not hiding. Living with quiet confidence. With a heart that is no longer guarded by fear. With a story that belongs to me. And that is how my days unfold now. Steady. Honest. Open. I walk forward knowing that being seen no longer threatens me. It simply reminds me that I am here. And being here, fully and truthfully, is more than enough. As I stayed with that feeling of enough, I noticed how gently my expectations of life continued to soften. I no longer expected clarity from every situation. I no longer expected people to behave in ways that made sense to me. I accepted that everyone is carrying something unseen. That acceptance made me kinder. I stopped measuring my days by productivity. What I accomplished mattered less than how I felt while doing it. Calm became my measure. Presence became my reward. My sister and I spoke one evening about the idea of regret. "Do you regret anything now?" she asked. I thought carefully. "I regret doubting myself," I said. "But I don't regret surviving the way I knew how." She nodded. "That sounds fair," she said. It did. I had stopped punishing myself for choices made under pressure. I noticed how differently I listened to others now. Not waiting to respond. Not scanning for threat. Just listening. That kind of listening created space. People felt it. I felt it. I realized how much strength there is in allowing things to be unresolved. Not everything needs a conclusion. Some things simply settle. Salma's words from long ago returned to me sometimes. Not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that truth can survive quietly until it is ready to be heard. That gave me hope. I no longer tried to trace every feeling back to its origin. Some feelings did not need explanation. They needed acknowledgement. One afternoon, while walking through the city, I noticed how comfortably I moved. No tension. No urgency. I belonged to the space I occupied. That sense of belonging was new. I thought again about the woman at the bus stop. How easily I could have dismissed her. How close I came to walking away. I realized something gently important. Sometimes courage looks like staying still. I stopped thinking of my story as something that needed protection. It was not fragile. It was resilient. I no longer avoided places that held memory. Memory did not control me anymore. It informed me. I learned how to sit with myself without distraction, without reaching for noise or movement. That stillness felt safe. I noticed how differently I handled disappointment. It did not undo me. It did not confirm old fears. It passed. I understood something quietly but deeply. Peace does not mean the absence of pain. It means pain no longer defines you. The bus stop existed as part of the city's rhythm. People came and went. Lives crossed briefly. That was all it ever was. And yet, it had given me something lasting. Recognition. I continued living with that recognition. Not as a spotlight, as a steady light, guiding me forward. I no longer feared being called by name. I no longer feared being known. I carried myself openly, not because the world had changed, but because I had. My story continues in this way, without urgency, without fear, just presence, just honesty, just life unfolding, one ordinary moment at a time. And that is where I choose to remain. Here. Living. As I moved closer to the end of this long inner journey, I noticed something simple and comforting. I no longer felt the need to check where I was going. For years, I kept looking ahead, worried about whether I was moving in the right direction. Now, direction felt less important than presence. Wherever I was there fully. I began to understand that the hardest part of my life was not what happened to me. It was what I carried afterward. The doubt. The shame that did not belong to me. The fear of being seen. Letting go of those things took longer than letting go of the past itself. But slowly, they loosened. I stopped asking myself how different my life might have been. That question no longer felt useful. The life I had was real. It had weight. It had meaning. And it was mine. My sister once said something quietly powerful. You don't tell your story like you're asking for permission anymore. I smiled when she said that. Because she was right. I was no longer asking to be believed. I was simply speaking. I realized how deeply silence had shaped me. Not just the silence imposed on me, but the silence I learned to create inside myself. Breaking that silence did not require shouting. It required listening to my own voice again. I noticed how easily I forgave small misunderstandings now. Not because I was trying to be kind, but because I no longer saw misunderstanding as danger. People misunderstand each other all the time. It does not have to mean harm. I became gentler with time. I did not rush conversations. I did not rush healing. I allowed things to arrive when they were ready. One afternoon, while sitting alone, I realized something that made me smile softly. I was no longer afraid of quiet endings. Endings no longer felt like abandonment. They felt like completion. I stopped defining myself through pain. Pain had been part of my story, but it was not the whole story. I was also curiosity, patience, resilience. Those qualities had grown quietly while I was focused on surviving. I thought again about the woman at the bus stop. How she spoke my name without hesitation, without apology. That moment had stayed with me because it did something simple. It reminded me that my name carried no shame. It never had. I no longer felt the need to trace every step of my healing. Healing was not a path I needed to map. It was something I noticed in how I lived, in how I breathed, in how I rested, in how I trusted myself. I began to see my life as a long conversation, not an argument, not a defense, a conversation that unfolded slowly, with pauses, with silence, with moments of recognition. I no longer avoided ordinary places. Ordinary places were where life happened, where truth surfaced quietly, where recognition could arrive without warning. I noticed how differently I reacted when someone used my name now. There was no tightening in my chest. No need to brace. My name felt like a simple fact. A sound that belonged to me. I understood something deeply and clearly. The past does not disappear when it is acknowledged. It becomes less heavy. It stops demanding your attention. I stopped worrying about whether my life looked complete from the outside. Completeness is an internal feeling. It cannot be measured by others. As I continued moving through my days, I felt a steady sense of grounding. Not excitement. Not relief. Grounding. The kind that stays. I realized that the woman at the bus stop did not give me closure. She gave me confirmation. Confirmation that my memories were real. That my feelings were valid. That my silence had not erased my truth. And with that confirmation, I no longer needed anything else. Not explanations. Not apologies. Just the ability to live honestly. I walk now without fear of recognition. Without fear of my past catching up with me. It walks with me. At my pace. My story does not end with answers. It ends with understanding. And understanding is a gentle place to rest. I was once afraid of being known. Now, I understand that being known does not diminish you. It grounds you. So I continue. Not rushing. Not hiding. Living with my name intact. Living with my past acknowledged. Living with a quiet confidence that does not need to be proven. And if I ever find myself standing at that bus stop again, I know this now. Whatever happens, I will listen. I will trust myself. And I will keep walking forward. Calmly. Honestly. Whole. As I come closer to the place where this story naturally rests, I feel no rush to arrive. For most of my life, I hurried through emotions. I hurried through decisions. I hurried through silence, hoping it would end faster. Now, I let things end when they are ready. That patience feels like wisdom I earned slowly. I no longer expect my life to explain itself. I used to believe that if people understood my story, they would understand me. Now, I know something gentler. Understanding myself is enough. Others may meet me where they can. I stopped rehearsing what I would say if someone questioned my past. Questions no longer frightened me. If they came, I would answer. If they didn't, I would live just the same. That freedom felt quiet but deep. My sister and I shared one last conversation about our childhood. Not to reopen wounds, but to acknowledge them. We survived in different ways, she said. And we both paid a price. Yes, I replied. But we also learned how to live again. That felt like the truth. I noticed how little resentment I carried now. Resentment once felt like protection. Now, it felt unnecessary. Letting it go did not mean forgetting. It meant choosing peace over replay. I began to understand that healing does not change the facts of your life. It changes your relationship to them. The facts remained, but they no longer owned me. I stopped seeing the past as something behind me. It felt more like a foundation now. Not something I tripped over. Something I stood on. One morning, as I walked through the city, I noticed how familiar everything felt. Not because it was unchanged, but because I was no longer at war with it. I belonged to my life. I thought again of the woman at the bus stop. Not with surprise. With gratitude. She did not save me. She reminded me. And sometimes, that is the greatest gift. I no longer searched for moments of recognition. Recognition had already happened. Inside me, I accepted that my story would never be simple. But it was honest. And honesty gave it dignity. As I sit with all of this now, I feel something settle fully. Not relief. Completion. The kind that does not announce itself. The kind that stays. I was once afraid that my past would define me forever. Now, I know something else. My response to it defined me. The woman at the bus stop knew my name. And my past. But what mattered most was what I chose after that moment. I chose to listen. I chose to believe myself. I chose to stay present. And that choice changed everything. Not dramatically. Quietly. So this is where my story rests. Not in silence, but in peace. I walk forward with a steady heart. With my name spoken without fear. with my past acknowledged, not hidden, and with the quiet knowledge that I am no longer running from who I am. I am here. I am present. And that is enough. As I let that sense of peace settle fully, I noticed how gently my need for certainty faded. For a long time, certainty felt like safety. If I could understand everything, I thought I could control how much it hurt. Now, I understood something simpler. Life does not offer certainty. It offers moments. And how you meet those moments matters more than understanding them. I stopped asking myself whether I had done the right thing in the past. Right and wrong had once felt very heavy to me, like fixed points I could never move. Now, they felt more human. I did the best I could with what I knew then. That was enough. I noticed how rarely I replayed old conversations now. They used to loop endlessly in my mind. Now, they passed through once, if at all. That quiet felt earned. My sister once said, almost casually, "You seem settled." I smiled when she said it. Settled did not mean small. It meant rooted. Rooted in myself. I no longer feared that the past might suddenly return and undo me. If it returned, I knew how to meet it. With honesty. With calm. With boundaries that protected me without closing me off. I realized how deeply I had learned to live cautiously. Even joy was once measured. I allowed myself to feel joy now without checking if it was allowed. Joy did not need permission. I noticed how differently I related to my own mistakes. Before, mistakes felt dangerous. Now, they felt instructive. They showed me where I learned. I stopped explaining my calm to people who mistook it for distance. Those who knew me understood. Those who didn't did not need to. I began to see my life not as a collection of events, but as a continuous movement. One choice leading to another. One moment shaping the next. Nothing wasted. The bus stop still existed somewhere in the city. People waited there every day. They stood with their bags, their phones, their thoughts. I wondered how many of them were carrying stories they never spoke aloud. That thought made me softer. I no longer believed that pain had the final word. Pain spoke loudly for a time, but it did not get to decide who I became. I learned to trust the quiet voice inside me again. The one I had ignored for years. It was steady. It was kind. It never rushed me. I thought about how easily life can change without warning. Not always through loss. Sometimes through recognition. Through someone saying your name and meaning it. The woman at the bus stop did not ask anything from me. She did not demand a response. She simply acknowledged what existed. That acknowledgement gave me back my footing. I no longer felt the need to revisit that moment. It lived inside me as a turning point, not a destination. I stopped thinking of myself as someone who survived something terrible. I thought of myself as someone who learned how to live truthfully afterward. That distinction mattered. As I continue my days now, I do so without the weight of hiding. I speak when I need to. I rest when I need to. I trust myself. My story does not end with a lesson. It ends with a state of being. Calm. Present. Unafraid. I was once afraid of being known. Now, I understand that being known starts from within. When you know yourself, recognition loses its power to wound. So I walk forward, not looking for answers. Just living. Just breathing. Just allowing my life to unfold as it is. And that is where I choose to stay. Here. In this quiet, honest place. Where my name belongs to me. Where my past rests gently. Where my future does not frighten me. I continue. As I continue in this place of quiet honesty, I notice how little I ask of life now. I no longer ask it to make sense. I no longer ask it to be fair. I ask only that it lets me remain present. And it does. I think back to the years when my life felt like something I was enduring instead of living. Each day felt like something to get through. Now, days feel like something to move within. That difference is subtle, but it changes everything. I no longer feel the need to protect myself from memories. Memories are no longer sharp. They are simply parts of a long path I walked. Some parts were dark. Some were lonely. But they led me here. My sister once asked me if I still felt sad about what happened. Yes, I said honestly. But sadness doesn't scare me anymore. Sadness no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a reminder that I cared. I stopped confusing numbness with strength. For a long time, I thought being strong meant feeling less. Now, I know strength means feeling fully and still standing. I noticed how differently I experienced compassion. Before, it was something I gave outward. Now, it included myself. That self-compassion softened everything else. Salma's voice sometimes returned to me in memory. Not her words exactly. Her calm. That calm showed me that truth does not always need force. Sometimes, it just needs patience. I stopped searching for reasons why people behaved the way they did. Understanding motives did not heal me. Accepting reality did. I began to trust the rhythm of my own life. Not comparing it to others. Not judging its pace. It unfolded exactly as it needed to. One afternoon, while sitting alone, I realized something gently surprising. I felt content. Not relieved. Not proud. Content. That feeling did not need explanation. I no longer feared that peace might disappear. Peace was not something fragile. It was something built slowly, choice by choice. I thought again about the woman at the bus stop. How ordinary she looked. How extraordinary the moment was. Life often works that way. I did not hold on to that moment. I let it become part of me, and then I moved forward. I realized that my story did not need to warn anyone. It did not need to instruct. It simply existed. And in existing honestly, it carried its own quiet meaning. I no longer felt the need to speak my truth loudly. I spoke it clearly. That was enough. As I stand in my life now, I feel something steady beneath me. Not certainty. Trust. Trust in myself. Trust in my ability to face what comes. I once believed my past was something I needed to escape. Now, I know it was something I needed to understand. Understanding did not fix everything. But it freed me. The woman at the bus stop knew my name. And my past. But what mattered most was what I chose to do with that knowledge. I chose to stop running. I chose to stop hiding. I chose to live openly. And that choice continues to shape my days. In small ways. In quiet ways. In ways that feel real. I walk forward now without the weight of secrecy. Without the fear of being seen. Without the need to explain who I am. I am here. I am present. And I carry my story not as a burden, but as a part of myself. This is not an ending. It is a resting place. A place where my heart is calm. Where my name feels safe. Where my past is acknowledged without power over me. I continue from here. Living honestly. Living gently. Living fully. And that is enough for me. As I move into this final stretch, I feel no pressure to make it sound important. Important things have already happened. What remains is simply the living of them. I no longer wake up thinking about what might go wrong. I wake up noticing what is already right. The quiet. The light. The fact that I am here. That used to feel ordinary. Now, it feels meaningful. I think about how much of my life was once shaped by fear of exposure. Fear that if people knew everything, they would turn away. But the truth is simpler. People come and go for many reasons. The ones who stay do not stay because you hid well. They stay because you were real. I no longer try to manage how I am perceived. That effort was exhausting. Now, I let myself be as I am. If someone misunderstands me, I let that be their work, not mine. My sister and I spoke one last time about the idea of endings. She said, "Do you think this chapter ever really ends?" I thought for a moment. "No," I replied. "It just becomes quieter." She smiled. That felt right. I have learned that quiet does not mean empty. Quiet can be full of understanding, full of acceptance, full of a calm that does not need to announce itself. I stopped waiting for the past to stop mattering. The past will always matter, but it does not have to lead. I decide what leads now. I notice how easily I forgive myself these days. For hesitation, for mistakes, for not knowing sooner. Self-forgiveness used to feel undeserved. Now, it feels necessary. I no longer avoid moments that remind me of who I used to be. I meet them with respect. That woman did what she could. She kept me alive. I thank her quietly and continue. I understand now that healing is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to who you were before fear taught you to disappear. That return takes time. It takes patience. But it happens. I think again of the bus stop. Not as a place of surprise, but as a place of choice. I could have walked away. I could have pretended not to hear. I didn't. And that decision changed the direction of my life. Life rarely changes because of grand plans. It changes because of small moments where you choose honesty over comfort, stillness over escape, listening over denial. I no longer expect my story to feel complete to others. It feels complete to me, and that is the only completion that lasts. I notice how my body feels now when I speak about my life. There is no tension, no tightening, just a steady presence. That tells me everything I need to know. I have learned to trust pauses, not to rush them, not to fill them. Pauses allow truth to surface. I no longer look for lessons in everything that hurt me. Pain does not always teach. Sometimes it simply passes. And passing is enough. I understand now that dignity does not come from being untouched. It comes from being honest about what touched you, and still choosing to live openly. The woman at the bus stop knew my name, and my past. But she did not define me. She reflected me. And reflection is only powerful when you choose to look. I looked, and what I saw was not someone broken. I saw someone tired of hiding, someone ready to live without shrinking. That readiness has stayed with me, in how I move, in how I rest, in how I allow myself to take up space. I no longer fear recognition. Recognition does not steal anything from me. It simply reminds me that I exist. As I move forward now, I do so without carrying explanations. I do not need them. My life speaks quietly for itself. I accept that there will be days when memories return unexpectedly, when something old stirs. I know now that those moments will not undo me. They will pass. I trust myself enough to meet whatever comes. That trust is my greatest peace. This is not a dramatic ending. It is not meant to be. It is a settling, a soft landing. I am no longer defined by what happened to me. I am defined by how I chose to live afterward. With honesty, with calm, with courage that does not shout. The woman at the bus stop knew my name, and my past. But the most important thing is this. I know myself now, and that knowing has changed everything. So I continue, not running, not hiding, living each day as it arrives, carrying my story gently, standing where I am without apology. I walk forward with my head clear, my heart steady, my name my own, and wherever life takes me next, I know this. I will listen. I will trust myself. I will stay present. That is how my story rests. Not closed, but whole. As I let my story rest in this place of wholeness, I notice something gentle and steady inside me. There is no urge to go back and check anything. No need to explain. No need to defend. For the first time in my life, I feel settled without conditions. I understand now that peace is not something you arrive at once and keep forever. It is something you choose, again and again, in small ways. In how you speak to yourself. In how you allow silence. In how you stop punishing yourself for surviving the only way you knew how. There are still days when memories visit. They do not knock loudly. They simply appear. A face. A sound. A moment I had not thought about in years. When that happens, I do not tense. I acknowledge them. I remind myself that remembering does not mean returning. I think about the version of me who once stood at that bus stop, unaware that a single sentence would change her inner world. She did not know she was ready. She only knew she was tired. Tired of carrying a story alone. Tired of doubting her own memory. Tired of shrinking. And sometimes, being tired is the beginning of honesty. I no longer see that day as a shock. I see it as an invitation. An invitation to stop running from myself. My sister once told me, "You don't look back with fear anymore." She was right. When I look back now, I do so with clarity. I see the silence. I see the damage. I see the strength it took to endure. And I do not judge myself for any of it. I understand now that I did not lose years. I lived them. Living through confusion, isolation, and doubt is still living. It still counts. I stopped measuring my life by milestones. Marriage. Recognition. Approval. Those things no longer define success for me. Peace does. Integrity does. The ability to sleep without replaying the past does. I notice how calmly I carry myself now. How I do not rush to explain my choices. How I trust that the right people will understand without details. That trust feels mature. It feels earned. I no longer search for moments to prove my strength. Strength revealed itself quietly. In endurance. In patience. In choosing honesty when silence felt safer. I think about how many people live their entire lives doubting their own memories. Wondering if they imagined the pain. If they misunderstood the silence. I wish for each of them what I was given. Recognition. Not from the world. From within. The woman at the bus stop did not give me answers. She gave me permission. Permission to trust myself. Permission to stop questioning my own truth. And once I took that permission, I no longer needed anyone else's. I stand in my life now without tension. Without hiding. Without waiting for something to prove that I deserve peace. I already do. I know there will be moments ahead that test me. Life always does. But I also know something else now. I am not fragile. I am resilient in a quiet, steady way. If my name is spoken again by a stranger, I will not flinch. If my past comes up, I will not fold. I will meet both calmly. Because neither defines me anymore. They are parts of me, not threats to me. I no longer live as if I must earn the right to exist fully. I exist. That is enough. This is where my story settles. Not with a dramatic ending. Not with justice served or apologies spoken. But with something deeper. Acceptance. I accept what happened. I accept what didn't. I accept who I was. I accept who I am now. And from that acceptance, a quiet strength remains. One that does not need to be seen. One that does not need to be explained. The woman at the bus stop knew my name and my past. But what matters now is this. I know myself. I trust my memory. I trust my voice. And with that trust, I continue living. Open, calm, unhidden, carrying my story gently, without fear. That is where I stand now. And that is enough. As I remain in this place of calm, I notice how little effort it takes now to stay honest with myself. Honesty no longer feels like something I have to prepare for. It feels natural. I do not weigh my words as heavily. I do not second-guess my feelings. I allow them to exist, and then I let them pass. That simple rhythm has brought me peace. I think about how long I believed peace would arrive only after everything was explained. After every truth was spoken. After every wrong was admitted. Now I understand something gentler. Peace arrived when I stopped demanding explanations from the past. The past does not answer questions. It only shows you what happened. What you do with that knowledge is where peace begins. I no longer feel the need to confront anyone. Not my parents. Not old ghosts. Confrontation once felt necessary. Now it feels unnecessary. I do not need to stand in front of anyone to prove what I lived. My life already reflects it. There are moments now when I catch myself smiling for no reason. Not because something wonderful happened, but because nothing is wrong. That used to feel unfamiliar, almost suspicious. Now, it feels like home. I think about the younger version of me often. Not with sadness, with compassion. She believed silence would keep her safe. She believed distance would protect her. And for a time, she was right. Those choices were not mistakes. They were survival. I honor that now. I have learned that survival and healing are not the same thing. Survival keeps you alive. Healing teaches you how to live. Both are necessary, but they arrive at different times. I no longer measure my growth by how little I feel. I measure it by how honestly I respond. If I feel sadness, I allow it. If I feel peace, I trust it. I do not judge either. The bus stop remains just a bus stop. People still stand there with their bags and their thoughts. Life moves on around it. But inside me, it will always mark a shift. Not because of what was said, but because of what I chose to hear. I chose to hear my own truth instead of running from it. That choice did not fix my past. It freed my present. I notice how grounded I feel when my name is spoken now. It no longer feels like a call back to something painful. It feels like recognition of who I am. A whole person. Not a secret. I stopped explaining my calm to people who expect drama. Some people are uncomfortable when you no longer react the way you used to. That is not my responsibility. My responsibility is to remain true to myself. I understand now that healing does not erase memory. It changes the relationship you have with it. Memory becomes information instead of accusation. That change is everything. I no longer live with the feeling that something is missing. Nothing is missing. Some things simply unfolded differently than I expected. Different does not mean broken. I have learned to trust stillness. Not as emptiness, but as presence. Stillness allows you to hear what matters. I no longer search for validation in people's reactions. If someone believes me, that is fine. If they don't, that is also fine. My life does not depend on being believed anymore. I believe myself. There is a quiet confidence that comes with that belief. It does not need to be announced. It shows in how you walk, how you pause, how you respond instead of react. I think again of the woman at the bus stop. She did not stay in my life. She did not need to. Her role was not to accompany me. It was to reflect something back to me that I had forgotten. my own certainty. Once I reclaimed that, I no longer needed anyone else to carry my story for me. I carry it myself now, with care, without fear. I no longer feel like my life is something that needs to be corrected. It does not need correction. It needs respect. Respect for everything it took to get here. I respect my silence now, not as weakness, but as part of my journey. And I respect my voice too, because I found it when it mattered. There will be days ahead that are difficult. I know that. Life does not promise ease, but it promises moments. And I trust myself to meet those moments as they come. If I ever feel lost again, I know what to do. I will pause. I will listen. I will return to myself. That is something I did not know how to do before. Now, I do. The woman at the bus stop knew my name and my past. But the greatest change happened after she walked away. I stayed with myself. And that is where my story rests now. Not hidden, not unfinished, but whole. I am not waiting for the past to loosen its grip. It already has. I am not afraid of being seen. I see myself clearly now. I move forward with quiet strength, with acceptance, with trust. My name feels safe in my mouth. My past feels settled in my heart. And whatever comes next, I know this. I will not disappear from my own life again. I will stand where I am, present, honest, and unafraid. That is where I end. And that is where I continue.